Welcome to the Story Learning Podcast, regular doses of language learning tips and motivation to help you become fluent in any language. With me, Olly Richards. For language programs, books, free resources, and much more, visit StoryLearning.com. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the I Will Teach You a Language podcast. I hope you're having a fantastic day. I'm using a new microphone today. I'm testing out, the microphones that we're using for the recordings, for the conversations product that we're doing this month. We're about to start the recording for the German conversations, just about an hour or so. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to record a quick podcast episode using the mics that we've got. So how does it sound? Is it better than normal? Does it make a difference? Do you even care? Sometimes I wonder whether microphone quality really matters. Let me know. Tweet me at Olly_IWTYAL. That's a terrible Twitter handle. Or you can search Olly Richards on Twitter and you'll find me there. Let me know whether you like the microphone. If you do, maybe I'll use this on a more permanent basis. All right, so in this episode, I thought I would... So here's what's going on. As you know, I've been working on a beginner's Spanish course for a while, and it's the first time I've actually created a language course for beginners, like to teach a language from scratch. And as it happens, there's a beta version that is released this week. And if you've been following me on the email list, if you've been receiving my emails and actually opening and reading them, you may have decided to join the beta group. And so that's that. But I thought that it would be interesting to talk a bit about the creation process of a course. I know lots of you guys are language teachers. Many of you would like to be language teachers. And many of you obviously take language courses. And so you will have had the experience of going through a language course in some form, definitely as a learner, but also maybe as a teacher. So I thought it might be interesting to talk about the process that I've been through to create this beginner's course in Spanish, because I'm really, really proud of it. And I really like it. I'm not just saying that because it's my course, but a lot of time and thought and energy has gone into this. And so for those of you who are interested in course creation, I thought you might like to hear my process. So here's the thing. When I first started to conceive of this course, I guess that everyone does this, right? When you make a language course, everyone sits down and thinks, well, how can I make the best course ever? And so I'm not going to sit here and claim that this course is, a revolutionary course and it's the best course ever and it's a new way to learn a language, blah, 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 because everybody says that. So there's no point in me saying that. But I will tell you the main considerations that have gone into it, because at least then that kind of gives you an idea. At least then you kind of know, okay, well, that sounds like something I'd like to do or not, right? And so there are a few main considerations. The first of which actually comes from my experience running the Fluent Spanish Academy, which until now has always been for intermediate level learners and up. So I get to meet and speak to a lot of people who are kind of struggling at that intermediate level in Spanish. And I have observed a few things that happen to people. And there are two big things that happen, right? The first thing is that people complain, oh man, I can't understand Spanish speakers when they're speaking because it's all so fast, and I panic when I don't understand a word, etc., etc., etc. And so listening comprehension is a big deal, and it has the effect that, if you don't understand something, you then start to avoid conversations with people because it gets a bit scary. Right? The second thing is speaking, and people say things to the effect of, when it comes time to speak, I kind of freeze up because I can't put sentences together as quickly as I can when I'm just studying by myself, and it takes me too long to remember words and put together sentences in the right order. So there's this kind of this double whammy, if you like, of not being able to understand Spanish speakers and then not being able to actually talk. And you can imagine if you struggle with those two things, you're in trouble, right? It doesn't make language learning very easy. And so from the beginning, I wanted to create a course that really sets you up for those two things, so that whatever else happens in the course, you develop the ability to understand spoken Spanish, and you also develop the ability to speak Spanish yourself. Now, none of this happens overnight. It takes months and months and months. But as long as you're doing things that are likely to help you get good at those two things, as long as you're studying in a way that's likely to help you develop the ability to understand and speak, then over time, you will get there. The problem is, so often people just get stuck in their textbooks and they avoid speaking and they never listen to much Spanish, that they can study for months or even years and not get any further. So one of the things that my kind of approach is for this is to say, look, I'm not going to give you a shortcut here. This is not going to be a, learn Spanish in a month kind of course, because that's silly. But what I do want to do is give you the materials and get you to study in such a way that you kind of develop into a competent, confident, and agile user of Spanish by the time you get to the end of the program. And so the question was, well, how do I do that? Like, what's the best way to actually set you off learning Spanish so that you do develop those abilities? And I, like, time and time again, the reason I didn't create this course earlier was because I wasn't really sure exactly how to do that. I wasn't sure the best way to do it. But the more I thought about the course and the more I thought about what I wanted to create, the more I kept coming back over and over again to the idea of story. Now, as I'm sure you know, if you're a regular listener, I have a series of short story books in lots of different languages that you can get on Amazon. And these are mostly, they're either short stories for beginners or short stories for intermediate learners. And they've been wildly popular. They've been at the top of, I'm super grateful. They've been at the top of the listings in Amazon, the Amazon foreign language section for years now. And people write to me on a daily basis saying how much they enjoy the books. And this thing of story just comes up over and over again. And so I realized that if people enjoy story this much, then why not base everything I do now? I started off thinking, why don't I base this course on story? And it's becoming more and more like how I want to pitch my whole brand, really. It's about creating language learning materials that are founded on story. And so really, this Spanish beginners course is my playground for experimenting with this idea. And so what I did is I went out and I created a story that is in 20 chapters. 20 chapters because I think a good length for a course is about 20 modules. Bearing in mind it's a substantial course that takes you all the way to intermediate level. So 20 modules, just like, most textbooks have like 15, 20 units in them, don't they? So the course is in 20 parts, and so the story is over 20 parts. And what I did was I created this story in simple Spanish so that even as a beginner, you can start to read and understand it. Now, obviously, in your first few lessons, if you've never learned Spanish before, it's difficult to understand. But that's all part of the approach, because, all right, in the first couple of lessons, you struggle to understand, but the point is that you start listening to real Spanish from the beginning. Okay, so the story is written, it's a very cool story about three friends who find this kind of dusty old book about Spain in a library. And they actually go off to Spain and they travel around Spain looking for all the clues they find in this book and discovering Spain and Spanish culture along the way. So in every module of the course, and what you do basically is you read a chapter of the book and you listen to it, because we have I've got the audio professionally recorded as well. So you get to read the chapter, you get to listen to the chapter, and then you read the English translation of the chapter of the story later. And you kind of just, you basically immerse yourself in that. Even if you don't understand or even if you struggle, doesn't matter. You read a bunch of times, you listen a bunch of times, and then after that, it gets into the teaching part of the module. So I break it down and I have these video lessons where I kind of teach you the stuff from the story, right? So the main grammar and the main vocabulary from the story, I teach you in these video lessons and worksheets and things like that. But the main point here is that every kind of module of the course revolves around this chapter from the book. Now, think about it. If you spend all your time, if when you're studying and learning a new language, if you spend all of your time reading and listening, by the time you get to the end of the course, you've spent dozens and dozens, maybe even hundreds of hours actually reading and listening to real Spanish. And you compare that to what most people do, which is you kind of get a textbook and maybe listen to a bit of audio here and there and watch a few TV programs that are far too difficult and then struggle through the occasional conversation. You kind of spend very little time actually listening.
But the way I've kind of thought about this is to kind of give you Spanish that is at a very easy and accessible level while still being challenging, right? And then to say, right, you're going to spend all of your time listening and reading to this. And then anything you don't understand, then we explain all of that in the lessons themselves. And so by doing that, by spending all this time listening and reading along at the same time, you develop your listening skills so that you get used to listening to Spanish. And then after, going through the whole course and completing the whole book, having read this entire book in Spanish, you are going to have really good, strong listening skills. It's not to say you're going to understand everything. That wouldn't be realistic. But you're used to the sounds of Spanish. You're used to listening to the language, to picking out words, to listening to the sound of a native speaker's voice. And I think that level of listening is something that people really don't get enough of. And yet still wonder why it is they don't understand native speakers. Right? So anyway, this is the kind of concept that I ended up landing on when creating these courses. Okay, I want to really give the best possible material and the amount of exposure. And so that's what became the engine of the course. Now, the second thing that I mentioned earlier was the problem with speaking. And it's the fact that, if you don't, well, how can I say? However, irrespective of how you actually study, everyone gets to a point where they want to go and speak Spanish with somebody, but they freeze up when they do. And there's only one reason that happens, right? It's nerves and pressure that come from talking to somebody you don't know in real time. And so it's pretty straightforward to solve that. What it means is you have to get regular practice speaking throughout your journey of learning a language. And again, this is something that many people avoid. People will say to themselves, right, I'm going to study until I'm at intermediate level, then I'll start speaking. But of course, you've just wasted the last year or two, not taking advantage of the time and opportunity to actually speak. And so what I needed to do, I knew that with this course, what I had to do was build in this opportunity to speak and to talk. Now, obviously, being an online course and not being a face-to-face class, I'm limited in what I can do to actually get people, to get students to actually speak. But for me, there are two parts to this. The first part is the speaking practice you can do on your own. This is how you just practice speaking at home, going through exercises, creating little monologues that you read, practicing the words that you say, externalizing, verbalizing stuff. All these little things you can do by yourself that really get you used to just speaking and pronouncing. And then the second thing is actually speaking with real people and trying out the stuff that you learn. And so what I decided to do on the course to facilitate this was to have a speaking section at the end of every module. So imagine, you begin module 1 and then you spend all that time listening and reading to the story, so your comprehension is strengthening. And then you study all of the words and the grammar and the phrases that I've chosen from that chapter, and you spend a lot of time actually kind of studying in a more traditional sense. And then we have a pronunciation lesson where you work on your pronunciation. And then finally, you get to the speaking section. And so what I do is I have you do two things. First of all, there's a set of exercises that take the words and phrases from the chapter of the book and give you these exercises to practice by yourself at home. But then there's a series of kind of expansion tasks which you can take to your friend or your teacher or your language partner or whoever it may be. And it's actually written in Spanish. So you literally just hand it to them. And what it tells them is, look, the student has been, this is what they've just learned, and it lists the words and the phrases and the grammar. Here's what they've learned, and here is how you can help them practice it. So here are the exact exercises. Here's what to ask them. So all you got to do is then hand it to somebody who can then help you practice those specific things that you've been learning from the unit. And so what that creates is this kind of cycle whereby you start by doing a lot of listening, a lot of input. You listen to the sounds of Spanish, you learn these new words and phrases, you study this grammar, and then you practice that exact same stuff. You practice speaking it by yourself and then with somebody, so that you've got this complete cycle of learning something and practicing it. Learning it, practicing it, using it, and then go round and round and round. And so imagine then if you kind of keep that up over the entire course, how used to Spanish are you going to be by the end of it? If you go through that with 20 complete modules, all the time that you're spending listening, all the time that you're spending then practicing speaking, it is like, for me, this is, okay, it took me a while to kind of land on this as a concept, but it really strikes me as a very efficient, very targeted, very deliberate way of going about learning a language. And again, I'm not going to say it's easy, but for me, like with language learning, it's not so much about like, is this easy? Is this quick and easy? It's much more about, does this work? Because I know that you know that learning a language takes time, and you don't get overnight results. I think you would be happy, and you can tell me if I'm wrong about this, but for the most part, you understand you have to work at it, right? The only thing that you really want is to know that after you spend a certain amount of time studying and learning, you are actually going to be able to speak that language at the end, right? So all that really matters is that the way that you set about studying actually works. And so for me, it's that combination of things. It's giving you a lot of listening and reading material at the beginning. And then at the end, it's giving you a lot of different opportunities to practice speaking that stuff. And the thing that ties it all together is this story. And it's the fact that you follow these characters through their journey and you read and listen to an entire book during the course. And for me, the fact that the story is there gives it that element of fascination and intrigue. It pushes you, it makes you want to learn. And so there we go. Like that's basically how I've gone about putting together this course. There's a lot that I haven't mentioned here. Like obviously, there's a lot of written exercises. There's a whole bunch of pronunciation videos and things like that as well. And we do things like, for example, one of the things that we focus on after reading the chapter of the book is we look at the cognates. So we look at the words in Spanish which you kind of get for free from English because they're very similar, right? Like the word like nación, which means nation, or región, which means region, nativo, which means native. Like these words that you can learn very, very quickly because they're almost the same as English. So we kind of go through this process of that as well, of teaching those cognates before moving on to the more difficult stuff. So there's a lot of stuff there that I haven't really been through. But in terms of the concept of the course, like that is how I've gone about conceptualizing it and putting it all together. So there you go. What do you think? Does that sound like an appealing course? Is it the kind of course that you would like to study yourself? Do you think it would work for you? It's very different from all these kind of modern app-based courses where you just kind of press buttons and have these kind of really kind of quick win type approaches to learning. I much prefer the more in-depth approach, so that's what I'm going for. Let me know if it's something that you like, or whether you would question or challenge any of the things I've said and its efficacy. You can come and leave a comment on the show notes. iwillteachyoualanguage.com/episode 206. Likewise, if you'd like to ask me a question for the podcast, please do. You can go to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/ask to do that. And at the end of every episode, I like to leave you with a resource of some kind on the topic of the show. And you might have guessed what's coming. As I mentioned earlier, I'm releasing this new course, and it's actually Fluent Spanish Academy Beginners. This is what the course is called, and it's a complete Spanish course to take you from the complete beginner stage all the way up to intermediate level. The idea being that you start with this course, and then at the end that leads perfectly on to the Fluent Spanish Academy, which is the main Spanish training program that I have. And I am asking for beta members. Now, these are people who will basically kind of test run the course and will give me feedback on it, basically. So you go through the course. It's the complete course. It's totally finished. You go through it and you give me feedback on it to let me know which bits you like, which bits you don't, anything that's missing, anything you want me to add, all of that stuff. Now, I've over email, I've been asking people for expressions of interest, and I've been very deliberately making people jump through hoops, if you like, because I don't want just anybody going through this, because I'm looking for good quality feedback. But because you are a podcast listener and you are so cool, I wanted to mention this on the podcast as well, just to make sure that if this is something that you're interested in, you do get the opportunity, because part of the deal with a beta membership is that you get 50% off the price of the course. So it's kind of worth it if it's something you're interested in. It's not a cheap course because it's so comprehensive. It is a full Spanish program. But if you are interested in joining as a beta member, I will give you half price enrollment. And if you would like to find out more about that, then head over to the show notes. iwillteachyoualanguage.com/episode 206. And I'll put a link there where you can find the page, the information page for the course. And if you'd like to join up, you can. There's a very short time window for this. The date that this podcast goes out will, I think, be the 31st of July, if I'm not mistaken. And the enrollment period for this will be open for a week. So you've probably got up until around the 7th or 8th of August at the latest. So bit of a time constraint there. But if you are interested, please hop over to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/episode 206 and you can find some more information there. All right then, hope you enjoyed that. Bit of an insight into the crazy workings of my brain. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of the podcast.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. And here at Story Learning, everything that I do is powered by stories, whether that's writing books, teaching lessons, crafting courses. My mission is to help everyone succeed at learning a new language through the power of story. And we now have comprehensive language courses in over 15 languages, from Spanish to French, Korean to Japanese, and across all levels from beginner to mastery. And you can take a 7-day free trial of any of these programs by visiting storylearning.com/courses. I've poured my heart and soul into creating these courses over the last 10 or so years, and we've helped tens of thousands of new students achieve their dreams of learning a new language, all through the power of story. So go ahead and take a free trial. There's no commitment. You can try out our method for free. See if this can also be the breakthrough for you that it's been for so many other people. storylearning.com/courses.